think since Lehman Brothers, after that, people talk a lot about how banks should change their regulations for the whole industry in order to ensure more transparency or accountability. Have things changed at all since then?
Sure. I think the regulators have got far more intrusive in terms of their expectation from banks. Banks are at the end a regulated industry, and I think the regulators have now made it far more incumbent. The listing rules have become far more demanding in terms of transparency, and the most obvious case to the point is the capital. Everybody's going to have to raise more capital. Everybody's going to have to redefine under Basel III how their risk-weighted assets are comprised, and there's going to be different capital allocation for each category of your business. So I guess people are just going to have to make sure that either they do very low-risk business, or if they do high-risk business, they have to have a lot of capital. There is only two ways about going about it in the future.
Mm-hmm. Where should the balance be between market self-regulation and government control?
I think the world was moving to self-regulation. The whole Basel concept, etc., was about self-regulation and standardized, etc. But clearly, there has been a strong sense among the banking industry that the regulators were lax in enforcing supervision in some or many instances, and so unfortunately what that resulted in is a few banks taking advantage of that laxity, and now the whole banking industry having to pay for the fault of a few people who just took advantage of some weak because they didn't self-regulate themselves well, and took advantage of a weak supervisory intrusion, and so now the situation is that everybody is going to have to pay the price, and you're going to get far more intrusive regulation. Some of it has unintended consequences which are not positive for the industry, because what the world needs is growth and needs more credit, but some of the regulation makes it cumbersome to give more credit to the lower ends of the market, the SME, the smaller customers.
We see the Occupy Wall Street movements in the US as well as in other major cities around the world. As a banker, what does it reflect to you?
I think there is a genuine sense of disappointment with the banking industry. So like I said, a few rotten apples have sort of spoiled the whole box. And there is a genuine disappointment, and I think Occupy Wall Street is trying to express that disappointment. The issue really is about, the disappointment is understood, but what is the solution? Is it a carte blanche regulation which just makes it difficult for the economies to grow? Because at the end, the growth is going to come from the real economy, and if the real economy is choked by either need for excessive capital or disincentive for risk taking, banking is a risk taking business, and it's never going to be anything else. And I think to the extent there's not sufficient inducement for risk, it will affect economic growth.
How can banks help close the gap, the divide between the rich and the poor?
I think there has to be social interest on the part of the bank, for sure, but there also has to be sufficient incentivization from the government to make that happen, because it's not just about somebody wanting to do it or not do it. It is an issue of reach, it is an issue of credit, because there is no data mining. It's also an issue of price. So in many countries people object to, let's just take one area of access of credit is microfinance, okay, and people object to microfinance charging 20% say interest to a poor farmer. The issue is, what is more important? Is it for the farmer to have access to credit in a transparent way, or is 20%? Because the alternative is for him to go to a money lender for 100%. He doesn't get from the money lender at 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. They charge 100%. And he's also at their will and mercy, and there is no course of, it's not a very transparent mechanism. So, and that's what, so, people focusing on the cost and not on the access. And I think the access is more important. And the cost is a very relevant thing, because you are taking higher risk and you are having to reach out for a very small ticket item to a very distant location. And those involve costs. So, it is going to come at a higher cost. So I think there has to be some political pragmatism to how this gets done. But if the governments and the banks are willing to act in alignment, I think banks, because they are the return on that business is quite good. We have very low defaults. We do microfinance. We have about $500 million exposure in microfinance, and we are not worried about the credit. The credit is all right. It's just the reach is a problem. The cost, the return is the problem.
Is Standard Chartered planning to open a branch in Myanmar?
We would like to. We were in Myanmar in 1858. That's when we started. So, till the sanctions came in, we were there for a long time. And we would, as soon as the sanctions are lifted and the rules are clear on the ground as to what can be done, we would very much like to be back in Myanmar.
But Aung San Suu Kyi seems to be telling investors or bankers, anybody who want to invest there, to take caution. Do you agree with her? She seems kind of skeptical somehow.
Yeah, healthy skepticism is what she said. But I think that would be true of any market which is so first time into the world. 10, 15 years ago that was true of Vietnam. It is true today of Mongolia, and it will be true tomorrow of Myanmar. They are going to have requirements for understanding, getting into the world, in a free market economy. It takes a lot of learning to do that. And but on the other hand, this is going to be an opportunity for several decades of building physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, all the natural resources potential they have, the connectivity they provide. Myanmar sits right in the middle of ASEAN and South Asia,
right,
and is the connection. It opens up a connectivity which could be very meaningful. So we have the ASEAN bloc and we have the South Asian, largely India, but the South Asian bloc, and Myanmar could really become the gateway to make that a much bigger bloc by itself.
There's this perception about bankers that bankers are greedy people trying to squeeze maximum profits, maximum out of everybody. What would you say to that?
Well, I think it's anecdotal, surely, but people say the same thing about lawyers, and people say the same thing about other professions as well. But I would say that when I speak for Standard Chartered, we've been around 150 years. You can't be around for that long and grow as significantly as we have if you had that in reality, if you practice that kind of greed. But we also have a very strong social conscience. We do a lot in the communities that we operate in. So we do a very big global initiative which is called Seeing is Believing, and we have a plan to restore eyesight to several millions of people. We plan to raise $100 million. We've already raised half of that. And by 2020 we are going to raise $100 million just to cure people of cataract and blindness. But we do many other programs as well on the social side. So we do believe that that is an important element, and our employees very much love that social fabric in the company. So I think it won't be true in a generic sense, but you'll always have some politicians being quoted as in many countries as very greedy breed, and you get lawyers who are greedy, but I think that goes with the turf.